What you're looking at is Glongo Boy, a game I made for a game jam that I organized myself. The themes I had to follow were dynamic physics simulation and cycle of life, so I made a 3D game where you play as a soft body, locochoco kind of guy and have to solve puzzles in order to be able to fertilize eggs. None of the other jam participants got these same two themes though. In fact, we didn't even participate at the same time. In a typical game jam, a central theme is revealed at the start of the jam, and then everyone makes their games up until submissions close. That theme helps stop people from starting development before the jam officially starts, which would give them an unfair advantage over anyone else. The jam I organized is structured a little different from that. I wanted to do this jam with my friends from the Outer Wilds modding community, which is a small community but still big enough that trying to find an intersection among everyone's schedules becomes difficult. One solution to this is to simply extend the jam period, since it's obviously easier for people to find some time within a whole week than in just a single weekend. I personally don't like this because the thought of competing against someone that has a whole week of free time feels immediately demotivating, since I'll probably only work for a couple days max. Plus, I find that when people are given too much time, they tend to procrastinate and overscope more. That's why in this jam, every participant has a different jam theme, which only gets revealed once they start their personal jam countdown timer. The themes are unique to each participant, and once they click this button, there's no going back. This probably raises some immediate questions like, how do you keep this fair? Cause aren't there gonna be some themes that are easier than others? And is this even a game jam? Does this make the jam boring since it's no longer about all the different interpretations of the same theme? The first step was for people to submit theme suggestions using this jam web app that I made, and for that everyone had to log in using their Discord account. In order to keep the jam a bit more cohesive, we gave it the central theme of Outer Wilds, which meant that all of the submitted themes needed to relate to Outer Wilds in some way. But that's basically the extent of it. Once the themes are actually being used to make a game, there's no need to include the Outer Wilds connection anymore. Meaning participants are free to reinterpret the themes in ways different than intended. A great example of this is the theme Space, obviously referring to the outer space elements of Outer Wilds, which was reinterpreted as storage space in the entry Meteorite Disk Space by leespork. The way it would work is, once a participant wants to start their jam, they click the big button and this gives them 3 randomly selected themes. They would then have to discard one of those themes, and the 2 remaining ones would have to be present simultaneously in their submission. This would hopefully help with variety while also giving people some control to avoid bad RNG. People submitted themes for about a week, and we got a total of 73 themes submitted by 18 different users. I made sure to always include the name of the person who suggested the theme whenever the theme is displayed, because I felt like this gave it an extra sense of community, like these are people that also had a hand in making the games in some way. While cleaning up the themes, I realized that the central theme probably vastly increased the likelihood of collisions. For instance, imagine you're giving these 2 themes, space and spaceship. That's basically the same as getting just spaceship. Trying to think of all of these combinations and deciding which ones to delete seemed kinda silly and against the original intent of building a system that takes care of all of this automatically. So after discussing with the community, a user Zen42, if that's even his real name, suggested using evil AI to fix this. So using a stupid but smart enough AI model, it calculates how similar each theme is to all other themes. We can then make sure that a participant is never given themes that are too similar to each other. For instance, here you can see how physics laws is 72% similar to dynamic physics simulation, which is above whatever arbitrary threshold I picked, so these 2 themes would never be given to the same participant. So the time for the jam came, and a few people started clicking their big jam buttons. Since the themes are randomly assigned at the moment of starting each participant jam, the organizers of the jam, which in this case are just me, don't have the advantage of knowing the theme in advance. It's still not 100% fair, since in my case I'm also the creator and maintainer of this whole system, so I could easily cheat by messing with the database and giving myself any themes I wanted, and no one would be able to tell. So you'll just have to trust that I didn't do that. Anyway, I clicked the big button and got my themes. The themes I got were Dynamic Physics Simulation by Zen42, Illusion of Fate by Vembok, and Cycle of Life by Etherpod. I discarded Illusion of Fate and started thinking about how to use the other themes. I've been getting into Godot a lot lately and happened to read about Godot's built-in soft body nodes a few days earlier. So I thought it could be a good way to explore the dynamic physics simulation theme while learning something new. I had no idea how I'd integrate the cycle of life theme yet, I just hoped it would eventually come to me during development. It was immediately obvious that Godot's soft body 3D node wasn't meant to be used this way, but it still worked surprisingly well. At first I was applying linear forces to all points in the mesh to make it move around, and I was kinda surprised to see how instead of sliding around as I expected, it actually rotated due to friction with the ground. Jumping also started as just a magical force being applied upwards, which worked well enough, but to better satisfy the dynamic physics simulation theme, I tried to make things a bit more realistic. So instead of linear forces being applied in the direction of movement, I now apply a sort of rotational force. There's no angular velocity that can be applied to the entire body here, so I had to apply forces to each vertex in the direction of intended rotation. This sacrificed air control, since now we're fully reliant on ground friction to move, but it felt a lot more realistic to me, or at least as much as a weird alien jelly blob can. Instead of jumping with a magical upwards force, I tried inflating the balloon, which also worked surprisingly well and made it so instead of a vertical jump, you now get a bump away from any surface you happen to be touching. All of this does make the player a bit more annoying to control initially, but I found it really satisfying and fun to play around with. I added some eyes to the player character so you can immediately see the current input direction, some textures here and there, and tried designing some physics puzzle elements. At some point I was messing around with some rigid spheres and thought, hey, those kinda look like eggs, maybe they're eggs, so I made them eggs. The goal being this would somehow eventually lead to the theme of cycle of life. I still didn't know exactly where I was going with this, but for some reason I decided to just start making a tutorial and hope a proper game loop would somehow manifest itself during that process. And it kinda did. So what I ended up with is you start by hatching from an egg, then you need to consume a fertility donut, and once you're fertile, which is marked by these little antennae, you're able to sacrifice yourself and turn into particles. Important to note that these grates allow these death particles through, but nothing else can go through them. Once enough particles touch an egg, the egg becomes fertilized and a new blob can now hatch from that egg. And yeah, that's the cycle of life. I then tried to mix these new features with the puzzle elements I had created before and basically made a single level that takes place after the tutorial. So the entire game ended up being just half tutorial, but I still think it came out pretty okay. I picked the name Glongo Boy at random right at the end, and that was it. That was my submission. Everyone else submitted their games, and we got a total of 9 submissions. That might not sound like a lot, and it's not a lot, but as I said, this is a pretty small community. This is our first game jam, and our previous mod jams had a similar number of submissions, so I'm pretty happy with this turnout. And now it was time for me to actually play the games and rate them using the same jam system that I made. Locochoco got Time Reversal by Locochoco and Orbital by Vesper. The resulting game Into the Asteroid Belt is meant to be inspired by Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, but I don't actually know anything about those games, so I'm not sure in what way it was actually inspired by them. You control 2 ships, or I guess you control 1 ship and another just follows you around, and you have to reach the end of the levels before the time limit, or you have to start the whole thing from the beginning. It took me a while to get used to it and understand some of the mechanics, but once I knew what was happening, it was actually kind of fun. The Lowdown got the themes Exploration and Cosmic Horror, both by Ditsy. They made THRUSTSPARK SCANCAM-22, which is this very disorienting and a bit claustrophobic game where you control a drone in first person 6 degrees of freedom and gotta zap these things and scan these other things, and there was this whole non-Euclidean geometry thing going on. It was very cool. Codercleric got Warp by Zen42 and Non-Human Species by Ditsy. They made Astrozoology, a game where you're exploring a bunch of planets and learning about new creatures. I'm not sure what genre you'd call this. It's like a point-and-click adventure kind of thing with really good writing describing all the different species and their environments and how they react to your choices. Vesper and Zen42 got Tornado by Zen42 and Hourglass by Spatial X. And they made Glorpo Game. You drive a truck around trying to chase tornadoes and take pictures of them. It felt super weird to control for like 2 minutes and then it clicked and I had a lot of fun. You also have the power to reverse time and try to line up the perfect shot, and you get rated on a picture you take via some unclear criteria. Vladislav got Marshmallows by me and Supernova by Zen42, and they made Marshmallow Corporation. It's a puzzle game where you push a marshmallow around and have to cook them using the available campfires without overcooking them, while also being fast enough to finish the level before nearby star goes supernova. Hawkbar and insmoshable got Dying Stars by Zen42 and Time Loop by Ditzy. This is the outer wildiest game of the bunch for sure. A first-person sci-fi game where you're stuck in a ship and have to figure out what all the things in there do. You have a time limit, but also are able to control the speed of time and also reverse time. And there's a map you can use to move around, and there are stars going supernova. It's great. Leespork got Meteors by Zen42 and Space by Locochoco. They made Meteorite Disk Space. I mentioned it before, I love the interpretation of the themes here. It's one of those incremental games where you're just constantly deleting files to avoid filling up your storage, while buying new upgrades that take up more space in order to hack spacecraft and get more meteorite craters, and you just keep going on a loop like that until you get distracted and fail to delete enough files like I did. Spacecornet got Fear of Knowledge by Etherpod and Illusion of Choice by Vembach. Really nice visuals and atmosphere. You're just stuck in this room and meant to observe the spooky 2001 Space Odyssey obelisk on the other side of the door, while getting some interesting messages on your computer and while definitely not opening the door. After a total of 102 ratings were given to all of the jam submissions, we got our results. In third place we got THRUSTSPARK SCANCAM-22 by thelowedown. Pretty much everyone was into it, and I think it's worth emphasizing how a theme like cosmic horror isn't particularly easy to implement in the 3-day jam, but thelowedown nailed it. I got second place. I feel a little awkward acknowledging that I'm second place in my own jam, since I had basically full control over the outcome, so I don't really get to brag. But at the same time, it's like I only got second place in my own jam, which is maybe a bit sad. Anyway, the winner of the jam was Chronogreaser by Hawkbar and insmoshable. Congratulations to both of them, they definitely deserve it, and it makes total sense that the most Outer Wilds game of the bunch ends up winning when all the people voting are huge Outer Wilds fans. So well done and great job. So in the end, was it fair? Probably not. I'd say some of these theme combinations are way harder than others. That could probably be improved by giving more options that can be discarded, but I don't know, maybe not. And does not having a single shared theme make things more boring? Maybe. It seems like people still had a lot of fun, and while this is obviously not strictly better than a traditional game jam, it's different, it changes things up a bit, and it does basically fix the scheduling problem for smaller communities. So it definitely didn't feel like doing things this way broke something fundamental about game jams. Still felt like a jam, but I'm obviously biased. I would love to try this again on a larger scale maybe. I'm just not sure how yet, because it would require some changes to the system, since right now it does rely a bit on trust, so this would need like new controls for moderators and stuff like that. Anyway, I'm super thankful for everyone who participated in this experience, and I hope I'll get to do this again soon. That's all. Bye.